people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this per a tweet from International Boxing News. It appears that Kirsty Bavington versus Dee Allen over there in the United Kingdom by way of the EBU. It seems that that fight has been ordered.
What is the EBU title?
And it's a great fight. On paper, it certainly is. Kirsty Bavington has really rebounded off that loss to Sandy Ryan a few fights ago. And Dee Allen, the hard-punching, unbeaten up-and-comer.
This fight would be in the welterweight division.
If it were to happen, the thing is, I'm not sure that it will because Kirsty Bavington is spoken for. She's currently spoken for. She's supposed to be taking on Candy Wyatt early next month on the 10th.
Candy Wyatt, who's been in there with a lot of good fighters, Kirsty Bavington will be the latest.
If I had to choose between those two fights and which one I like a lot more, I like the Dee Allen fight a lot more than the Candy Wyatt fight.
The chance to see if Dee Allen can stay in character against a higher grade, higher caliber opponent in Kirsty Bavington.
I like Allen versus Bavington more than Bavington versus Wyatt, but Bavington versus Wyatt is already made.
So you know.
Kirsty Bavington, who sports a professional record of 7 wins with 2 losses, 2 draws.
2 knockouts.
Canada's own Candy Wyatt, who sports a professional record of 10 wins with 4 losses, no draws.
3 knockouts, having been knocked out 2 times.
3 out of those 4 losses, 3 of Candy Wyatt's 4 professional defeats happened in her last 3 fights. That's right. She's on a losing streak, whereas Kirsty,
she's on a winning streak, having won her last 4 outings, her last 4 fights.
So you can more or less see why a Dee Allen fight would be a bit more intriguing than a Candy Wyatt fight.
Candy Wyatt, who sat out all of last year, before that in 2021 lost to Jessica McCaskill and Alma Ibarra.
That was in 2021. 2020, she lost a unanimous decision to Kaylee Reese.
She's in a funk. She's in a bad way.
Whereas Kirsty Bavington, comparatively, has really hit her stride, and she's only gaining momentum. This is being billed as a welterweight contest. Welterweight.
Jessica McCaskill is still the woman to beat at welterweight. Jessica McCaskill, who's currently under orders to satisfy her mandatory challenger, Ivana Habazin.
I like Jessica's chances in that fight. The question is, will Jessica end up squaring off against the winner of this fight? And I'm not so sure. It's a possibility.
Yeah, maybe. I figure if the McCaskill people get themselves back in the winner's bracket, they're going to be looking for bigger fish to fry than a Kirsty Bavington.
So it still behooves Kirsty to keep the momentum going, keep herself in the winner's bracket, and keep inching forward towards a world title shot, a world title opportunity, irrespective of whether or not they fight Jessica after this fight or not.
In Kirsty's last 3 fights, she's given 3 unbeaten fighters their first professional losses. 3 of them. Naomi Mans, April Hunter, and Becky Ferguson.
Becky was making her professional debut.
Could Dee Allen be the next unbeaten fighter that Kirsty Bavington upsets the apple cart for?
Not completely sure. If you're Kirsty Bavington and you've made all this progress after having rebounded off the loss to Sandy Ryan, a fight with a Dee Allen, it is a risky proposition, you know. It's a bit of a high-risk, low-reward situation.
Dee Allen's been knocking these broads out.
Smooth out. There's a question as to whether or not she'll be able to stay in character, whether or not that power will hold up opposite the ring a better caliber of fighter. But if you're Kirsty Bavington, do you really want to find out?
Yeah, she'd probably make more money running it back with April Hunter on Sky Sports.
Not that she needs to. She's the one that won the fight, but if April Hunter wants to run it back to avenge that loss, it's an option.
I don't know that we're actually going to get Bavington versus Allen.
I don't want to make any bold proclamations, but as stated, Kirsty Bavington's already got a fight on schedule next month,
irrespective of what the EBU ordered.
So as good as that fight might look on paper, I don't know here and now that we're actually going to see that fight in the near future.
Even after the Candy Wyatt fight, even if Kirsty wins.
Kirsty Bavington, even if she beats Candy Wyatt, and I think she can, I think she will. Beyond the Candy Wyatt fight, Kirsty Bavington is likely going to want a bigger, better fight for more money than a Dee Allen fight. So I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. Lightweight news. Ryan Garcia had this to say to Gervonta Davis. He said, no rematch clause.
None.
Winner takes all, coward. Stop staying quiet, hiding behind Al Heyman.
It is true that Gervonta Davis has been eerily silent. He hasn't responded to Ryan Garcia's tweets.
We're literally down at the 1 yard line. What's holding everything up is the rematch clause, said De La Hoya. It's only fair. If Ryan wins, then our side controls everything as the A side. This is just the way it has always been. It's common sense that whoever wins is the A side. That's the bottom line. We're not reinventing the wheel here. Al Heyman is dictating everything. They've asked for this, asked for that. Who comes out first? The penalties if Ryan comes in overweight. We've given in. We've negotiated. And everything has been very pleasant. If Ryan loses, sure, there's no rematch. It's been a pleasant negotiation. It really has.
We've talked about Al Heyman and the Gervonta Davis side of things, leveraging everything in their own favor, so much so that it almost doesn't make sense for Oscar to do the fight.
I really hope their side doesn't fumble the ball and we have no Super Bowl. We at Golden Boy are just protecting our TV partners. It's only fair that everything gets switched around if Ryan wins. We're holding strong because we know it's fair and we feel 1,000% this fight is going to be made and the biggest fight of the last few years.
That has yet to be determined.
Selling a pay-per-view these days is more difficult than it's ever been in the last few years. Piracy is a huge issue these days. On Wednesday evening, Garcia posted an Instagram video of himself training at Coach Joe Goossen's 10 Goose Boxing Gym in Van Nuys, California, with the caption, "Stop running, Tank. Stop hiding from me. Stop staying quiet behind Al Heyman. No rematch clause. Winner takes all. Coward."
Gervonta didn't respond yesterday.
So far, he hasn't responded to Ryan's callouts here today. Perhaps the reason that Gervonta Davis has been eerily silent is because he has other things on his mind. He has 2 pending court dates this month.
One is next week.
He has some things to answer for, and perhaps he doesn't have time to get into a chatterboxing session with Ryan Garcia via social media.
Yesterday, the name of Regis Prograis was named as a contingency should things fall apart between Ryan and Gervonta.
Though, according to Ryan Garcia's side, the deal to fight Gervonta Davis is nearly finalized and is the only fight being discussed. They hope it will be completed in a couple of days. Feels like the bigger the fight, the longer the negotiations drag out in boxing.
It's a stout observation from Mike Kopinger.
To be clear, Golden Boy Promotions reached out to see if Regis Prograis was interested in the event. They can't finalize the Tank Davis versus Ryan Garcia deal. The Davis and Garcia sides are still working towards completing a deal for April 15th in Las Vegas. Rematch clause dispute remains an obstacle.
Oscar De La Hoya himself stated, contrary to rumors and reports, Golden Boy Boxing is 100% trying to finalize the Davis versus Garcia fight, although Regis Prograis fight with Ryan is also very intriguing. We are focused on taking the Tank versus Garcia fight to the finish line.
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Al Heyman negotiates like a coward. He negotiates like a guy who's not confident in his fighter, because if he were, why would he make the initial fight, the first fight, contingent upon the conditions of a second fight? If you believe in your guy, there ain't gonna be a second fight.
If you believe in your fighter,
What difference does it make? What does it matter if the rights to a second fight go to Golden Boy and DAZN if you believe there ain't gonna be a second fight?
if you believe Gervonta's gonna win,
Gervonta wins a fight, knocks Ryan out. Ryan ain't got no rematch clause. He loses, and it's a one-and-done deal. One-and-done situation. That's if you believe in your fighter.
doesn't seem like Al does.
These stipulations, the catch weight, and what happens in the event of a second fight, a rematch, and who gets those rights, and the Oscar De La Hoya, Golden Boy Promotions, Ryan Garcia people, they're just supposed to go along with this. They're just supposed to bend over for you on the premise of what? Gervonta's marquee value?
This lopsided deal.
Cable is a fraction, not even close to 50%. We can do the math, and we're not at 200, but this would be his second biggest behind Rolly, which was his biggest. Okay, we're not at 200, but we're not at 200, but we're not at 200, but
That soundbite from Showtime Sports executive Stefan Espinoza has been doing the rounds here in the YouTube boxing community, and If the numbers for the Hector Garcia fight,
He said they're not at 200.
a Twitter user that goes by the name Combat Convo 504 said, so if we're not at 200,000, but this is the quote-unquote second biggest behind Rolly, then common sense says that all his other numbers are lies. If your second biggest fight didn't hit 200,000, then no other fight outside of Rolly did.
It's a stout observation.
Gervonta Davis has been on pay-per-view 5 times, 5 consecutively. Previous estimates and ballpark figures put the numbers for his fights at just north of 200,000 buys.
But if this fight is his second biggest fight behind the Romero fight, if this fight that didn't crack 200,000 buys,
If this is his second biggest fight, and this fight didn't crack 200,000 buys, what that then means is that all those other fights didn't crack 200,000 buys. The Leo Santa Cruz fight, the Isaac Cruz fight,
the Mario Barrios fight,
none of them, based on what Stefan Espinoza said. If the Hector Luis Garcia fight is the second biggest fight behind only the Romero fight,
Right.
and the Hector Luis Garcia fight didn't crack 200,000 pay-per-view buys, that means those other fights didn't either.
and Ryan Garcia, Oscar, they're supposed to bend over for this guy?
After all the concessions they've already made, they're also supposed to concede the rights to a second fight even if they win?
For a guy who 4 out of the 5 times he's been on pay-per-view,
He didn't crack 200,000, irrespective of what the journos were saying and what ballpark figures they put out there. I fucking told you, they were rounding up. They were fudging the numbers.
they were exaggerating.
Because according to Stefan, this last pay-per-view was the second biggest he's ever put on, and this one didn't crack 200,000 buys, so the other 3 must not have either.
Common sense, something Gervonta Davis's fans seem to lack.
Seems that way. Those guys, they want to believe he's this fucking megastar. They want to believe he's a bigger draw than he actually is because they ain't got no common sense.
You guys are fucking stupid, man.
They're stupid. And you're expecting Ryan Garcia and Oscar De La Hoya to make even more concessions in the event that he wins.
Even if he wins, they don't get the rights.
Al Heyman's negotiating scared. If that's what causes this fight to fall apart, what that means that Al Heyman, he didn't trust Gervonta to get the job done, because if he did, he wouldn't have to worry about a rematch.
There would only be one fight. Ryan ain't got no rematch clause.
Finally, in men's super bantamweight news, Eddie Hearn says MJ Akhmadaliev would have absolutely no problem fighting Inoue for undisputed.
Because Inoue's very next fight is, in fact, for 2 of the 4 major alphabet titles at 122 pounds,
And MJ's got the other 2.
that means is that he could see himself become a 2-time undisputed champion in just 2 fights.
If Naoya Inoue defeats Stephen Fulton for 2 of boxing's 122-pound championships, Muradjan Akhmadaliev's promoter promised that making a full title unification fight won't be problematic. Eddie Hearn's Matchroom Boxing represents Uzbekistan's Akhmadaliev, who owns the IBF Junior Featherweight title and the WBA Super Bantamweight Championship. Japan's Inoue, 24-0 with 21 KOs, boxing's undisputed Bantamweight champion, is expected to fight Philadelphia's Fulton, 21-0 with 8 KOs, for Fulton's WBC and WBO 122-pound crowns this spring on a date and a venue in Inoue's home country to be announced.
Let's hope everything goes to plan.
We have 100% no problem with an Akhmadaliev versus Inoue fight, Hearn told a small group of reporters recently at Madison Square Garden. You know, if the Fulton fight with Inoue didn't happen, we'd make the MJ fight with Inoue right now. But if the Fulton fight against Inoue is to happen, which is a great fight, we'll complete undisputed with Akhmadaliev against Inoue. No problem.
That's assuming that Naoya Inoue wins. That's assuming that Naoya Inoue beats Stephen Fulton and takes his 2 alphabet titles.
I didn't think we'd be here, you know. Those of you that have been following this channel will know that I was not optimistic we'd get Inoue versus Fulton, so that is a pleasant surprise.
29-year-old Inoue is a superstar in Japan. Therefore, Akhmadaliev, like Fulton, would have to travel wherever the most money is, according to Hearn.
ESPN is expected to stream Inoue's fight with Fulton in the United States, even though Fulton is affiliated with Al Heyman's Premier Boxing Champions. If Inoue defeats Fulton, Hearn anticipates Akhmadaliev, a southpaw whose past 6 fights have been streamed by DAZN, would have to switch platforms for the opportunity to oppose one of boxing's biggest attractions. Ultimately, Arum won't want Inoue to come off of ESPN, Hearn said of Bob Arum, Inoue's co-promoter. So if they pay enough money, we have no problem
With the fight on ESPN.
Akhmadaliev is a star, but not a massive star at DAZN. It's not Canelo Alvarez, so DAZN would be happy if we were happy, and most importantly, MJ was happy. He would have absolutely no problem fighting Inoue. It would be a tremendous fight, Akhmadaliev against Inoue. Hearn also feels that Fulton versus Inoue is an intriguing fight, despite that Inoue is a much more proven puncher, albeit at the lower weights.
If his punch proves to be too much for Stephen Fulton and he stops him the way he's been stopping everybody else, that only increases the profile of Inoue in Japan and the profile of the fight with MJ Akhmadaliev.
Likely have to offer MJ something comparable to what he already offered Stephen Fulton.
An estimated $3 million, that's a lot of money for a super bantamweight.
I think Inoue is a tremendous fighter, Hearn said. The only way he's going to get beat is moving up in weight. It'll be like Lomachenko, you know. Lomachenko's a featherweight, super featherweight, they say. It'll be like Canelo Alvarez. You keep moving up in weight until you get beat. And that might be at super bantam or it might be at featherweight for Inoue. But Fulton is a very good fighter. So is MJ. They are two brilliant fights. The 28-year-old Akhmadaliev will make a mandated defense of his IBF 122-pound crown versus the Philippines' own Marlon Tapales in his very next fight on the undercard of Bam Rodriguez's next fight.
That card's already been announced.
It would seem that it took for a bona fide superstar to come into the super bantamweight division to bring it consolidation, because both MJ and Stephen Fulton, they had their chance to do a fight between them.
And the fight never happened.
Stephen Fulton, who says, I've been told y'all they was bitching to fight me for undisputed. Him and his team are some scary motherfuckers.
And I don't really think that's fair.
I don't. You can make the case that Eddie Hearn didn't offer Stephen Fulton anything to come over and unify titles with MJ, but the same can be said in reverse about Al Heyman. What did he offer MJ to do the fight?
If he offered him something, nobody wrote about it.
The way I see it, neither Team Akhmadaliev or Team Fulton did all that much to make a fight between them happen.
So let's not play into the blame game here.
Maybe Matchroom didn't try hard enough to make the fight, but the PBC didn't try either, so that makes them just as guilty.
Doesn't matter anyway. Stephen Fulton's en route to fight a bigger star, a bigger name than MJ Akhmadaliev anyway.
In spite of some initial skepticism, here's what's better. If something happens to Inoue versus Fulton and it don't go down, we can still get Inoue versus Akhmadaliev.
I mean, Inoue versus Fulton is a fight that I'm really looking forward to, but whether it's illness, injury, extenuating circumstances, if something were to happen to that fight, Inoue can always fight MJ.
Spin the block for Stephen.
So I'm just hoping that everything goes to plan without any unforeseen issues.
I'm waiting for Inoue versus Fulton.